Welcome to Saul Searching, the Saul Recruitment Podcast, where we tackle all sorts of great topics in the areas of recruitment, job searching, mindset, technology, marketing, culture, and lots more. It's amazing what you'll pick up. Thanks for joining me. Welcome back, everyone. Darren Saul here, your host of Saul Searching, the Saul Recruitment Podcast. Back again for another week and another show. It's episode 58, and I've got the fantastic Tom Hannemann in the house. How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me on your program. Look forward to a healthy discussion.
Absolutely. And the topic for today, reduce the stress and anxiety during job seeking by giving recruiters and hiring managers what they want. I love that. It's so true, because a lot of times when we job seek, we kind of forget to put ourselves in the perspective of the employer or the interviewer. And we just think about it all in terms of what we want, but it's a very, very different mind shift when you think about it from the point of interest of the other person. So great topic. And before we get into that, I'm just going to give everybody a little bit of a snapshot into who Tom is and what Tom does. So Tom Hannemann established Advance Yourself Career Services in 1997. Since then, he has helped thousands of executives, managers, and professionals move ahead in their careers. He is an expert in preparing resumes that lead to interviews for highly competitive roles, in overhauling LinkedIn profiles that attract the attention of recruiters in a crowded market, and ensuring that people ace their interviews to secure job offers. After graduating with a degree majoring in Behavioural Science, Tom spent the first 10 years of his career as a human resource development specialist in several Australian government agencies, and the following 10 years as a management consultant specialising in leadership development, executive recruitment, organizational change, customer satisfaction, and strategic thinking. In between, he completed an MBA at both the Australian Graduate School of Management and the University of Melbourne's Business School. Well, Tom, you've been a busy bloke.
Well, I certainly have. And actually, when I listen to that, it's actually all true.
I hope so.
No, absolutely no embellishment, which brings me to part of the topic is that when you're building your resume, your LinkedIn profile, and when you're presenting yourself at interview, executive recruiters, recruitment consultants, and hiring managers can smell embellishment a long, long way away.
Very true.
And so, and these days, it's possible to conduct a lot more in-depth checks on people than it perhaps was in the past, because everything you do and say these days, it's all online.
It is.
Yeah. So it makes sense that when you are putting yourself forward for career opportunities, that you stick to what is fact and what is true, so that you, yes, from a moral and ethical perspective, and also you're going to get caught.
Yeah, I agree.
At some point. We've all heard of people, or about people, some of whom are quite up there in terms of their seniority and their stature, and they made these just tiny, teeny thing, not quite correct things in their resumes and or LinkedIn profile.
Yep.
And eventually they were caught. One was with one of the big retailers, and he'd actually started the job. It was a big job, obviously big salary and all of that. And very shortly after he started, he had to pack his pencils and colouring books and go home.
Yep.
And that not only had an impact on that, it had an impact on his entire future career. Definitely. Which is basically shot down in flames. Definitely. So, in terms of keep to the truth, and you'll be rewarded for it. Don't try and embellish or exaggerate. Can I just give one more example?
Yeah, go for it. Sure.
working with two clients, both from the same company. They'd both been retrenched, senior management roles, and both claimed to have been the leader of a very large, significant project in that company.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question was it really you, or was it the other fella?
Yeah, I love that.
And that's an unusual situation, but those things can crop up because if both of them submitted resumes for the same job and they were interviewed by the same people, and one of them said, I led that project. Next one comes in and says, I led that project. Well, one of you did and the other didn't.
Yep, I 100% agree. I think I'm all for putting your best foot forward and showcasing your strengths, but not embellishing anything. I think that's really important. But I'd like to take it back before we go further. I'd like to kind of just get you to tell us a bit more about your story and get a sense of how you ended up in this field and what drives you to continually work in this field for so long.
Yeah, look, I kind of stumbled into it by accident many years ago when a friend of mine who had been retrenched from her job and had to kind of leave the same day and had no real opportunity for, to get her house in order to find another job. And she asked me, Tom, can you help me with my resume? I said, well, I don't know. Apart from writing my own, I've never written anyone else's. So she and I sat down for a few hours and cobbled something together. She was a bit of an expert in visual design and all of those things, and she was very computer literate, so she did all the fancy work, and it ended up being very useful to her. She got lots of interviews, lots of offers as a result, and that kind of snowballed from there. I started helping a few other people. By the time the year 2000 came around, I donated all of my suits and ties to a charitable organisation and decided to do this full time because I was getting so much, there was so much demand for this service. Amazing. That, and plus I've been working from home, for 23 years. I've always wanted to do that, not have to commute every day and not have to have the stress of, reporting to someone and getting results and achieving goals and all of that. So there's some of the motivators for the style of work, but really what I get from this is that there are immediate benefits to people. There are tangible benefits. Where previously I was in management consulting, and oftentimes as a consultant, you kind of do the work. You get a round of applause at the end of the presentation. You hand them the invoice, they pay the bill, and that's the end of it.
That's it.
There's no immediate sort of personal payoff. And so with this kind of work, you can see, I can see what the results are, and there's a great deal of personal satisfaction in knowing that I've actually made a difference to that person's life.
Right.
Because if you're getting career opportunities, if you're getting interviews, if you're getting job offers, that has an impact on them and the people who, depend and rely on them. Absolutely. So, there's a bit of warm and fuzziness about it as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's so true. So in terms of today, what do you think about the job market? Do you think it's more stressful these days than it was before? What's your take on that for people that are looking for work?
Yeah, I think it is. So let's say, I'll give you an example. One of my clients told me that he wanted to apply for a particular job. I said, where'd you find the job? It was on LinkedIn. Okay, how many candidates, or how many applications had they received by the time you saw the ad? And he said 300.
Wow.
Now, if that doesn't give you stress, now what I tried to impress upon him was that, okay, yes, there are 300 candidates, but out of those 300, probably 250 don't really have the credentials and ability and skills and expertise to do the job. Yeah. So bear that in mind.
Exactly.
But a lot of people get worried and stressed out about the sheer volume of competition.
Agree.
And the other thing is that everything's out there. You know, everyone's got a LinkedIn profile. And so everyone can see, you know, who you are, what you've done. And I think that places, you're no longer anonymous.
Yeah.
When you put your application in for a job, the first thing a lot of recruiters do, I think, is look at your LinkedIn profile and say, have you got a presence on LinkedIn? Yes, you've got a profile. Have you done something? Have you said something? Have you written a post? Have you written an article? So there's a lot of pressure on candidates to have a public face as well. And the other thing is that a lot of candidates are a little bit disenchanted by the recruitment process, because I think a lot of candidates find it difficult to understand what goes on inside a recruitment firm before they get an interview. There's things like applicant tracking systems.
Yep.
And people come to me and say, what's this ATS business? What's it all about? And so, you know, I try to give them a sort of quick explanation of what it's about, and that gives them a little bit of comfort. But a lot of people don't understand what they need to do in order to make sure that their resume gets through the automated readers, if you like, before human beings get to read their resume.
Definitely.
And so that, again, places additional stress on people. And the unfortunate thing about things like applicant tracking systems is that a lot of candidates miss out on good opportunities, and a lot of employers miss out on good candidates simply because the candidate didn't know what they had to do in order to get through the ATS.
Yeah, and that's why that's why I think it's really important for people to not rely on just that pathway. They should try and find another pathway to make sure they get in front of the right people, and not just rely on the applicant tracking system or the general process, because then you're putting your hands in the fate of technology or numbers or luck or whatever else. I think it's really important to try and bypass that if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I reckon I always ask candidates, or always ask clients, potential clients, how are you approaching the market? What's your go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, how are you marketing yourself?
Yeah, exactly. And I always recommend, particularly for more senior positions, senior professional positions, senior management, senior executive roles, that you shouldn't really be relying on or just using LinkedIn or Indeed or Seek or wherever else, because then you are competing with 100, 200 plus people, and that's not a happy place to be. So I suggest to people, ask the question, have you got a network?
Yeah.
Do you know anyone?
Yep.
Who do you know? Oh, I've got a network of 395 connections on LinkedIn. I said, there you go. There's 395. Now, guess what? What if each of those people knew, let's say, 50 other people, which would be a conservative? Now, I don't know what 395 by 50 is, but you know what I mean? It's a bigger number.
Huge.
And so I say, well, leverage the heck out of your network, both on LinkedIn and other places. And also approach recruiters directly.
Absolutely.
Tell them what you want. Tell them the kinds of roles that you're interested in, the kinds of industries and organizations that you want to work. And I say, just as importantly, tell them what you don't want.
Definitely.
Because it's frustrating for a recruiter to approach a candidate and say, hey, Tom, I've got this really great opportunity for you. And Tom says, well, you haven't really.
Yep, it's too far away. Really I don't want to come into the office every day, or it's going to take.
I don't want to work in that industry.
To get there. Forget it.
Hang on, that's a job in the tobacco industry, or whatever. So 100%. Tell them what you don't want, so that recruiters, although they're working for the client, they tend to be a lot more likely to be helpful if you give them good quality information if you give them a direction.
I love that. And I'm going to just jump in there because a good friend of mine who was a recruiter years ago said to me, he gave me this fantastic analogy and I love it. He says, a recruitment agent is like a taxi driver. You have to get in the car and tell the recruitment agent where you want to go. You can't just get in the car and expect to get there. So I think that's just a fantastic analogy.
Yeah. I want to go to Bondi, but you end up in Parramatta.
That's right.
Nothing wrong with Parramatta, but I wanted to go swimming today
That's right.
at the beach. So yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I recommend to candidates is, okay, so leverage a network, approach recruiters directly, and thirdly, approach organizations directly.
Yeah.
And that's a really powerful one, or it can be a very powerful one, in the sense that your competition's diminished, very small, and you're basically saying to the organisation, I'd be interested in having a conversation about some of the issues, pain points and challenges and opportunities your organisation's facing.
Yep.
So you're demonstrating immediately an understanding of their industry, perhaps some understanding of their company or organisation, and that you potentially might have some clues about how they can do a little bit better, how they can maybe save money or increase their market share or capture new market segments or whatever it is that you're offering.
Definitely.
And so you're not saying, I want a job. It's a warmer approach. You're saying, I know that your industry is suffering.
Yep.
For example, if I'm talking about residential construction, right? That industry is suffering. There's a lot of pain in that industry. And if you can show that you understand why they've got to that point, and that your experience will help them either recover or prevent the disasters that have befallen some of the companies that we read about every other day, that can be very, very powerful. So you're offering a solution to a problem, or you are offering the ability to capitalize or identify opportunities.
Beautiful. Perfect. And kind of brings me to another great question. What about from the other side? Do you think that recruiters and hiring managers are realistic these days in their expectations, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know whether they're any more or less. I mean, given that I've sort of been around for a couple of minutes, I don't know whether they're any more or less realistic than they were, 20 plus years ago. But based on what some of my clients and potential clients have told me, is that they want all of this stuff and they're only paying this much. Or it's an entry-level job, but they want 3 years experience.
Yep.
A lot of people have said that. So I'm not sure whether that's any different these days than it has previously. But what I have noticed is that employers can be a lot more selective about their choices because they've got a plethora of candidates. The point I make is that because it's a candidate-rich environment, then organisations have got a lot of choices. But the problem with that is that, and this takes me back to when I was consulting with a law firm, one of the big law firms, and I asked them the question, how do you recruit graduates? And these were senior associates, and their job was to, bring new graduates into the fold of the firm. And they said, well, basically, we get their resumes, and this was the day when you sent a resume in on paper. And they said, basically, we throw all of the resumes up in the air, and those that land face down, we select.
Oh my God.
For further assessment.
That's incredible.
And that was in fact what they did. because they said we have no other way of distinguishing or differentiating the candidates because they're all smart cookies. They all went to big universities, top tier universities. Yep. They all did very well. And based on their resume, given they're a recent graduate, they couldn't differentiate themselves.
Wow.
And so they thought, well, it's just luck of the draw. We might as well, pick every third one. But I don't think employers do that these days. But they are faced with a much more daunting task of having to work out amongst the sort of 100, 200 plus candidates, which are the ones that are likely to be a good fit, not just in terms of their experience and their expertise and their qualifications and so forth, all of that hard stuff, but in terms of, their cultural fit, their operating style, their leadership style, the way they manage things, the way they solve problems, all of those things that are much less tangible. I was reading something, and they said one of the biggest needs and biggest shortfalls is creativity, ingenuity, innovation.
Wow. Yep.
And we want candidates who are creative. Now, how do I know that candidate X is more creative than candidate Y? Well, you don't. And so there's, I think, more guesswork. I think maybe 20 plus years ago, it was more hard-nosed. It was like, if you've got 7 years experience doing this, then you're probably going to be able to do the job. Whereas now, just because you've got 7 years doing this doesn't mean that you can do the job, because the demands of the job are now different. We actually want you to put some intellectual horsepower into the role, not just your subject matter knowledge.
Definitely. Well, the amount of years you've been doing something. Yeah, love it. So true. So, Tom, I believe that you have culled down 4 very important components of a job-seeking strategy. Is that correct?
Well, it's essentially, what are employers and recruiters looking for?
Right.
So we're basically saying, or I'm basically saying to the people I work with, what we have to do is build your collateral, your LinkedIn profile, cover letter, and resume, so that they're aligned with what recruiters are actually looking for and what employers are looking for.
Very important.
Not in terms of the specifics of the role, but in general.
Yep.
And the first thing that the decision maker wants to know is, what is your unique value proposition? And I liken that to the motor vehicle industry.
Yeah.
Right. What's the difference between 2 brands, Mitsubishi, Mazda, all of that? None. No difference. And yet there is, because some people will swear black and blue, I'm going to always buy a Mitsubishi because I think they're better. Well, they're not actually better. Technically, they're not. They're not superior in any way, shape, or form. If we're comparing apples with apples, right? If we're comparing, say, a Mitsubishi Pajero Sport with a Toyota, whatever the equivalent is.
Yep.
And so the job of the marketer is to distinguish their brand from the other brand. And that's the art of pulling together your LinkedIn profile and your so basically what you've got to say to the audience, to your target market, is, this is what I can do for you. This is my offer. I'm not talking about my experience. I've got all that. I'm not talking about my qualifications, got all that. But here are the things that I can do for your organization. Here are the pain points. Here are the challenges. Here are the opportunities that I can help your organization capitalize on. And you've got to make it.
Here is my value, not so much my experience, but my value to you.
My value, the impact of what I've done, the significance of what I've done, and how that translates into what I can do for you. So that's the first thing, unique value proposition.
Definitely.
The second thing that employers and recruiters want is they want to know what is your expertise, what is your skill set vis-a-vis the requirements of the job. A lot of people, a lot of resumes that I see say, I've got all these things, this is my skill set. And there's a list of 10, 15, 40 bullet points. And half of them are relevant and half of them are not.
Yep.
And so I say you've got to tailor that section of your resume according to the requirements of the position. And they say, well, doesn't that, no, it takes 5 minutes. It doesn't take long. You read the ad and you pull out of the ad, you know, what they're looking for. Exactly. The third thing is when you're talking about each of the jobs that you've had, or your current job, your most recent job, and all your previous positions, the first thing they want to know is what was the purpose of the job? What was your mandate, if you like? What were you hired to do? What were the issues, challenges, problems, and opportunities facing the organisation that you were asked to help the organisation address? Whether you are hired as, you know, an entry-level data entry
person, yep.
Not even an analyst, just a data entry, just entering data onto a system. Or whether you are applying for the, you know, chief marketing officer, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You have a purpose, you make a contribution. What was that, or what is that? Second thing they were within that, or following on from that, is what were your sort of 4 or 5 priorities in this role? Mm-hmm. Not your duties, not your responsibilities, because employers and recruiters already know what a business analyst does. Yep. They know what a project manager does. They know what an operations manager does. They know what a marketing manager does, yep. Right? You don't have to tell them what you do because they already know that. Yep. So you don't need to explain what you do. So it's really, what are the 4 or 5 priorities? So first priority might be reduce the cost of goods sold, because we're suffering from external, overseas, yep. low-cost providers or suppliers. Yep. Second priority might be to rebuild a fragmented team, right? Yep. So when you start getting into that, people go, okay, that's how you make a difference to the company.
Definitely.
You're rebuilding the team. You are reducing cost of goods sold. You're increasing productivity. You are streamlining a process. You are elevating the skills of your team members and so on. So that's what your priorities are. Yep. And then they want to understand what your achievements were. Now, within achievements, there are a few kind of elements or components of that. They want to know, first of all, what did you do? Okay. Secondly, how did you do it? What was your approach or strategy? And thirdly, what was the significance? So it's how, what, and so what.
Yep.
So the so what is, okay, let's say reduce the cost of goods sold by 15% by sourcing an equally good supplier, same quality of inputs, and that enabled the company to invest in new equipment and machinery, which it previously was not able to do. So it's all tied up.
And then you might even add the outcome as well. And then it allowed the company to produce or generate X amount of sales or X amount of margin in the next 6 months, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So the outcome, the result, the impact, the benefit, the significance, all of those things. And the other thing that's important, and this is why some people do well in the application process and some don't, they position themselves as people who can, and if I may use a cricket analogy, because sure. We're still unfortunately in the cricket season, they want people who can score runs on what's called a sticky wicket.
Okay, nice.
Right. So it's very easy to score runs when everything's fine, the weather's great, the pitch is nice and even, the bowling is not particularly hostile, and you're a fairly competent batsman, and you can knock up a decent score. However, if you are facing hostile bowling on a wicket that's very green, got a lot of bounce, and they're hurling the ball at you at 160 kilometres an hour, it's really hard to score runs. And if you can score runs on that kind of wicket under those conditions, that's the person they want. So I suggest to people that they talk about the challenges, problems, or issues that they faced in getting that done. So we reduced the cost of goods sold, enabled the company to save some money, did it by sourcing lower cost inputs, and that required negotiating with people that we had never dealt with before.
That's right.
Oh, okay, all right. So these are not your normal suppliers. These are suppliers, and you got negotiated a lower price.
Yep. It's really lifting the hood on your day-to-day responsibilities. It's giving people more depth to what you do, not just what everybody expects that you do, because we all know what the function of their job title is. Let's lift the hood and really show people what you did.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I love that. That's really cool. Because you've obviously written so many resumes and over the years, and LinkedIn profiles as well, I want to just chat to you about resumes for a second, because that's something that I don't get to discuss often. And I always say that a resume is a marketing document. Its job is to just create interest and drive the person to want to know more, either give you a ring, ask you more questions, bring you in for an interview, whatever it is. And too many people get bogged down in every font, every heading, every space, et cetera, to make it look really pretty. And also maybe how many pages and all this kind of stuff, which is all important. But the first and foremost reason you use a resume is to get noticed. But I also want to talk about just the details about a resume. Things have changed over the years. How many pages is a resume? Should a resume be these days? So I'd love to get your expertise on just real basic resume writing 101.
Okay, I want to I'll respond to that, and I want to follow on with what else a resume can do for you.
Beautiful. Right.
Vis-a-vis the interview.
Perfect.
Right. So resume's purpose is to get you in front of either a recruitment consultant, executive search consultant, or a hiring executive, or an HR recruiter. So in terms of length, partly depends on the country you're in. In Australia, 3 or 4 pages for a reasonably senior professional, mid-career professional, senior manager, senior executive, 3-4 pages. Americans, for example, would say, if you're a senior executive, 2 pages.
Yeah.
If you're only got 5 years, 10 years experience, 1 page.
Yep.
So it does vary from nation to nation. But 3 or 4 pages is fine, provided that the information you include is all relevant to the kinds of roles and the organizations that you're applying to, and that there's no fluff, no fuzzy bits, no extraneous buzzwords.
Correct. Love it. Yep.
Like, I'm a seasoned professional. Now that means that somebody's put salt and pepper on your head. It makes no, So in terms of managing the length of your resume, reduce the number of adjectives.
Yeah, I like that.
And things like, I successfully managed a project to introduce a new.
We all know that. Just right. I managed the project. What do we need?
I managed a project to introduce a new CRM or whatever it is, or implement whatever it is that you did. But you don't need to use all of those adverbs and adjectives. And that often makes resumes inordinately long or difficult to read. And when a recruiter gets it, they want to scan the thing.
Yes.
as quickly as they possibly can, because, you know, time is money, and they don't want to spend an inordinate amount of effort getting to what's really important to them.
Love it. And by the same token, I've seen some people give me a one-page resume where they've had quite a few years of experience in Australia. And I sometimes ask myself, I wish there was 2 pages. I wish I had a bit more. Even though I say, great, obviously this person is experienced and I'll have a chat with them anyway. But I think giving that little bit of extra depth can make a difference. So I think that the number of pages in Australia is important. As long as
and giving the
relevant
people that extra insight, giving them that extra depth and understanding it is important, because it helps differentiate you from your competitors.
Yeah, great.
And I think the other point is that if you are striving for brevity, then think about what the reader really needs to understand about you.
Yeah.
And because you've got to create a narrative, you've got to create a bit of a story about yourself. You've got to provide an understanding of who you are as an individual, as well as what you are as an employee.
Definitely.
And the one pager just won't do that, for the simple reason that unless you use microscopically small font and have no margins, and I've seen people do that. They have almost no margins, and they're using 9-point Arial narrow.
Yeah, they're just trying to fit everything onto one page, but then I've got to get a magnifying glass out to read it.
Yeah, and as long as you send the magnifying glass, that's not a problem. But most people don't, you know. So yeah, don't think that. Sure, the first people have told me, recruiters have told me, hiring managers, the first half page is critical.
Yeah.
If you haven't captured people's attention by then, they probably won't read the rest, because you haven't given them enough. You haven't stimulated them enough, so they'll pass you over, go on to the next one. So that's why having that profile at the beginning with the unique value proposition, your areas of expertise relevant to the job, is so critically important.
That first little snapshot of who you are personally and professionally, just to kind of lead into the resume. I love that too. Yeah. Awesome. What about, where do you see AI and ChatGPT and all this kind of stuff coming into resumes and LinkedIn profiles these days?
I'm going to put on my, can you see that? I don't know whether you can see that.
Your reindeer.
Yeah, look, I tried to get the devil's horns, but I couldn't find it at short notice. But yeah, it's the problem with artificial intelligence is that it's developing at an accelerated pace that I don't think we've ever seen before.
For sure.
Even when the internet first came into being, it was kind of a fairly slow struggle, you know, to get it to where it is today. It was incremental. Now it's sort of quantum leaps.
It is.
Okay, so you got the ChatGPT. There's a company that made that. And then you've got Microsoft who's doing its thing. And then you've got Google doing its thing. And you've got every company doing its own thing with AI.
Yep.
And I think it's leaving people right now bewildered, because there's been no consolidation at all.
Yep.
And so people don't know, well, should I use this thing, or is this one better? And how do I optimize it? And I see a lot of articles on LinkedIn through my feed, which says, oh, here's the way you can maximize or optimize ChatGPT. And they give you like a nice PowerPoint thing which says you can do this, and you look at it and you go, I don't have 3 days to figure this out.
That's right.
But here's how I use ChatGPT, right? Because that's the one I'm most familiar with. I'm not an expert, but I've got at least some familiarity. Is I interrogate ChatGPT to tell me what are the requirements, what are the skills, expertise, and experience required in a program manager's job. So let's say we're doing a resume for a program manager. And so I want to be able to build a resume that is customizable, a kind of universal document that really never sees the light of day. And what ChatGPT will do is scour the internet and find all of the requirements for a program manager's job. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, you've got a pretty good handle on what recruiters are going to be looking for, because ChatGPT is scanning LinkedIn and Seek.
That's right. Love it.
And so I use it for that purpose. However, you cannot use ChatGPT to build your profile, for example. So your unique value proposition, because that's unique to you.
Correct. Yeah.
You cannot use ChatGPT to talk about the mandate of your role, because that was unique to you. You cannot use ChatGPT to talk about your achievements, because they're unique to you. You can't find your achievements, because all the AI does is, it looks it up.
Yeah.
And finds what's there. It can't make anything up. It's not creative. It can't build anything or design anything. And if you do ask artificial intelligence to reword your resume, guess what they're going to do? Fill it full of meaningless buzzwords.
That's right.
Like seasoned and results-oriented and team lover and wonderful human being. It's going to fill it with those, because that's all it knows.
That's right. Yeah.
Because that's what's out there.
Yep.
So the unfortunate thing about AI so far, right, I'm not saying it's always going to be that way. It's got a lot of limitations. And for those people who think that it's going to be their savior in terms of building your LinkedIn profile, your resume and cover letter, it's not.
Yeah.
And the other point is that a recruiter and a hiring manager will look at your resume and say, you got ChatGPT to write this thing for you, didn't you?
That's right. Yep.
And so that's the other side of it, is that, it's the psychological aspect. If a recruiter or hiring manager thinks that you haven't put in thought, effort, time into submitting your application or to building your application, then they might look at someone else who has.
Yes.
Because they might think, this person's trying to take a shortcut.
Correct.
And okay, look, sometimes you have to take a shortcut.
Yeah.
For time. Let's say you've got no time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone tells you there's a job available, you've got to apply for it by midnight tonight.
Yep.
Okay, got it. You might not have time. Yep. Because resumes should, it does take a bit of time, but I think it's still got a lot of limitations, and I counsel people against relying on artificial intelligence to build their career documents.
I like that. I think it can be used in certain parts of the process, but it's definitely not a finished product. You have to put your own voice into it and your own style into it, and take out some of those superfluous adjectives and adverbs as well.
Yeah. I mean, it can certainly help you with the structure, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't know what should go into a resume. What should be the order? What should be the headings, and exactly. All of that. Because some people haven't applied. I work with quite a lot of people who have been in their own business for 15, 20, 30 years. Never had to apply for a job.
That's right. Yeah.
So they wouldn't know. So using artificial intelligence for that purpose is valid, because it will give you the right answer for that.
It'll give you a framework, and then you need to go and customize it to you. That's the key. Yeah. So true. Love it. And from a LinkedIn profile point of view, any tips or tricks for people?
Well, one of the things to note about LinkedIn is it's stationary. Mm-hmm. It's like a billboard or a post. Back in the old days, we used to get posters on posts.
Yep.
and you can't adjust it or vary it according to the job. So it's really got to be broad enough.
That's right. It's generic.
To explain to people, this is the sorts of things I can do, but unfortunately you can't tailor it.
Yep.
But LinkedIn's not your resume.
No.
LinkedIn's got two functions. The first is to attract attention. You do that through your headline. All the words and phrases underneath your name, so you are searchable.
Yes.
So if you're a recruiter looking for someone with certain skills or experience or job titles, they'll search according to that. Same way that we use Google to search for our, a Japanese restaurant, in our neighbourhood if we're new to the neighbourhood.
Definitely. Same
principle applies. You've got to be searchable. So once you've been found, once you've attracted attention, the next function of LinkedIn is to stimulate interest. It's basic marketing. Attract attention and stimulate interest, so that when people read it, they go, okay, this person is worth having a conversation with, at least initially. Now, what I see with LinkedIn for a lot of people is, it's a bit like buying a parcel of land.
Yeah.
You buy this piece of land and the council has said, you can build a 12-story apartment building on this piece of land. But instead they pitch a tent.
I love it.
Right? And that's what a lot of people do. They just put in their job title, company name, how long were they for.
Yep. It's just so thin. It almost does a disadvantage to someone looking you up.
Well, two or three things happen when hiring managers and recruiters read that kind of LinkedIn profile. They say, well, this person's made no effort.
Yeah.
They're in the job market. They haven't got an about section which tells us their unique value proposition and what they can do for the sorts of organisations I'm recruiting to. Yeah. They haven't bothered to tell me anything about what they've achieved in any of the jobs. Why would I speak to them again?
Yep.
No. So they'll move on. So what that is kind of a waste of real estate. They haven't optimized the value of the real estate. And guess what? It's free.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you this. If LinkedIn were to charge members for their profile, let's say $20 a month, right? It's an affordable amount.
Yep.
And guess what people will do? They will build that 12-story building.
That's right.
You'll see the go up, overnight, because they're actually paying for it. But it's free.
Yep.
And so you've got to capitalize. It's like someone who's given you a free block of land.
Yep. I love that analogy. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Never heard that before. Fantastic. Don't pitch your tent. Build a 12-story building. Love it.
Yeah, because you've got permission to do so.
That's right. You got what's the word? You've got the council approval. Go for it.
Yeah, you got the DA's been approved.
Go. I love it, Tom. Well, I'd love to give you the opportunity to tell everybody a bit more about how you work and what you do so they can contact you.
Do we have enough time for me to just tell you about how resumes can improve your interview performance?
Oh, yeah, you sure. Go for it. Yeah.
This comes to me from feedback that I've got from executive recruiters and clients.
Nice.
And they say, because my resume was so effective in informing the hiring executive and recruiter about what I've done, about my achievements, accomplishments, contributions, all of those things that they wanted, because my resume was so effective in doing that, we could focus the interview on the future as opposed to trying to clarify or expand upon the past.
Oh, I like that.
So it positions you as someone who can fit into the role. In fact, some executive search consultants have come back to some of my clients and have said, because of the resume that you presented to us, we didn't need to ask about your achievements.
Yep.
They were all there.
All there.
What we could then do is talk about the challenges and opportunities facing our company.
Yeah. It almost does a lot of the job of the interview for you if you can try and do it properly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So how do I work? Before I work with anyone, I have a conversation, typically 15 to 30 minutes, to understand what they're trying to achieve and why they're trying to achieve it. And sometimes if I think that maybe they're barking up the wrong tree, or maybe what they're trying to get to could be beyond them at this point, we have a short conversation about that and ask them to think that through. Because that's important, because I don't want to create documents for people where they're not going to succeed.
Right.
Because they don't have the experience, they don't have the knowledge or the qualification that's mandatory in the company. So it's really a needs assessment, and then I talk about how I approach things. So the first thing I'll do, the first part of the process, is gathering information. So essentially what I do is pull apart their existing document. Most people have got a resume of some shape or form. And as I go through that, I put on the antlers and my recruitment antlers and ask the question, what do I need to know about this so that I can make an informed decision about whether to pursue this candidate or not? So I then pull together some questions, ask those questions. That then gives me all the information, having gone through that information gathering process. So if someone says, I ran a leadership, I developed and ran a leadership training program. Don't know anything about why was that good? How did that work? What was the impact? Company invested $6 million on that leadership program. Most companies measure things like, return on investment in training. So, ask them questions about what did they do? How do they do it? All of those things. Tease out of people. And oftentimes people don't really think about this stuff because you don't. You just get on with it. You just do the job.
Yeah.
And it's like the scientist coming home from the lab, and they greet their partner, and their partner says, "Oh, how was your day?" "Oh, it's pretty routine. I discovered the cure for COVID. What do you think we should do for dinner?"
Yeah.
It's like that's how most people operate. They don't, in most cultures, right? Certainly in Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and most of Western Europe, they don't blow their own trumpets. And so my job is to first of all give them a trumpet and help them play the thing.
Love it.
So, so that they're blowing their own trumpet, but not in a sort of arrogant way, not in a Muhammad Ali way. I am the greatest. Well, yeah, you were. We got that. But most people are not Muhammad Ali. They're not Michael Jordan. They're not Rod Laver. Yeah. They're not, Alan Border. They're not at that level. Yeah. Most of us are not. And so it's about getting people more comfortable and more confident about expressing their achievements in a straightforward, factual, crisp, clear way. Mm-hmm. And I will do that for them. And once I've done that, I'll send the document to them. They will then review, come back to me with any additional input or suggestions, or some changes that they might want to make, some things that they thought, I didn't talk about that. Can we add that in? Yep. That kind of thing. And then we'll polish the document. And that forms the basis of the information needed for their LinkedIn profile and their cover letter. Awesome. And then once we've done that, then and they start getting calls for interview, the next step is to sit down with them, for a couple of sessions on how to prepare for the interview and what to do to manage the interview process.
Right.
To meet their needs and the needs of the interviewer.
And do you coach them along the way through the process?
Through the interview process, I typically find that what most people need is 2 sessions.
Okay.
One session is about mental preparation, how to get into the right frame of mind. We saw that last night in the tennis. I don't know, we had someone who was playing way below their potential and way below the standard that they were playing in the previous rounds of the Australian Open. Why was that? Were they injured? Were they sick? No. Up here.
Yep.
The mental game. And his opponent had a much stronger mindset or frame of mind. And so I teach them what high-performing people do to get into the right state of mind.
Nice. Actors,
singers, athletes, public speakers, all of those people who need to be on top of their mental game. We've heard about Greg Norman choking in the golf tournament, the Masters tournament, way back when, I think 96, having a 6-stroke lead and losing by 5 strokes or whatever it was. But it was a monumental mental fizz. His head, he wasn't injured. No one stole his clubs. Yep. The weather was the same for everyone, but he blew a major lead and turned it into a disaster. Yep. All because of up here. Yep. So we focus on that first. And then the second session is more on techniques on how to specifically manage the interview process.
Oh, good. So
that you are giving them exactly what they want. Same as what you did for your resume and your LinkedIn profile.
Love it. So, Tom, if people want to find you and work with you, how can they do that?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. So they can just look me up on LinkedIn, Tom Hannemann, LinkedIn, and they'll find me.
Have you got your own website?
I've got a website, advanceyourself.com.au. A lot of the things that we talked about today are included in the blog, so they can find information there. And what I encourage people to do is to do a resume health check. So when they go onto my website, they'll see a pop-up which says, check the health of your resume. And they can download a form which allows them to work out, is their resume healthy? Is it sick? Is it somewhere in between? And then if they feel as though they need some help, then they can organise a 30-minute consultation, which is a free, no obligation.
Love it.
And then we go from there. If they're interested in working with me, then we talk through the process and the pricing.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Well, Tom, I just wanted to say thank you very much for coming on the show. I think we've given the audience, the viewers and the listeners, a lot of great information. There's been a lot of great insight from your 2 decades or so experience in this industry. And people can really learn a lot about positioning themselves, putting together the right documents and social media profiles, and just understanding the mental game and the mental strength needed to go through the process and be successful. So I just want to say Fantastic. Thanks for coming on the show. It's been great. Anything that you want to leave the audience with?
No, I just thank you for being part of the audience. Thank you. And I hope you got some good value out of the discussion that we've had today. And I wish you all the success in finding your next career opportunity.
Fantastic. And I love all the great analogies as well.
Thanks a lot.
Have some fun. But Tom, really appreciate you coming on. Everyone out there, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We'll be back very, very soon for our next episode of Saul Searching, the Saul Recruitment Podcast. Bye for now. Thanks again for joining me for another episode of Saul Searching, the Saul Recruitment Podcast. If you'd like to join me as a guest on the show, I would be delighted to collaborate. Feel free to buzz me on 0414 659 800 or email me on darren@saulrecruitment.com.au. I'm always on the lookout for great guests who can share their stories and expertise with my community. But for now, though, have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time.